because that was
Oh, so she doesn't have to speak?
Yes.
Agreed. Yeah. So I am Reverend Margalie Belizaire with the First Unitarian Church of Orlando, which is not too far from here. We take that main road there, you keep on going, and eventually, I think you do a turn, right? You right into us.
Somewhere.
Yes. But I understand that we are either the last or one of the last ones. Yes. So I'm really glad to be here with you today, sharing about our faith. And the way I will the reason I had to find a picture to put up is there'll be times when I'll be talking, and I'll be here running the PowerPoint and all that good stuff. Every time we're just talking, I'll put this up in case there's something that you need to read. But really, I'd like it to be casual. If you have questions in between, please feel free to ask. And I'll just say, Judith here is our director of religious education. So even though yesterday she's like, oh no, I'm not coming because it's her day off, but here she is. And of course, Martha, our photographer. I nicknamed her that, but Martha is a member of our congregation. So welcome. And please, like I said, feel free if you have a question to stop me. All right, so I want to say I'm just gonna go right to the PowerPoint, and basically, when we start our services, okay. So some of the information I just shared with you is here. When we start our services, let's do slideshow presentation. We usually start with a chalice lighting, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about the chalice later. But in our congregation here in Orlando, we use the same chalice lighting, which are these words here. And because we're starting something where we are talking about our faith tradition, and then we also usually light the chalice, which I have left in my car. I always have a portable chalice with me. And then so we'll start whatever we're starting, and we use it at meetings, at our congregations, online or in person. And we say these simple words to start us off. In the light of truth and the light of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to share. So I wanted to open up a space with them here as well. So the next thing I'm going to do is this little video here. It just kind of gives you an overview of us, and I figured this would be the best way to start. Okay.
We are Unitarian We are Unitarian Universalists. We are people of many paths who are brave, curious, and compassionate thinkers and doers. Every day, people are inundated with information, overwhelmed by demands, and pulled by a culture that seeks to divide us from the web of life. Unitarian Universalism reconnects, bringing people together with meaning and inspiration. We are a house without walls, a congregation without spiritual limits, and a movement that calls you to put more faith in yourself, your community, and your beliefs. We are a faith that honors your mind, your heart, your journey. Simply put, we are a guided path towards a better you and a better world. Grounded in hundreds of years of thoughtful religious communities, we are people of many generations, ethnicities, genders and sexualities, and spiritual backgrounds. People engaged in making the world a better place. People focusing on what really matters: love, justice, integrity, and hope. Unitarian Universalists have different beliefs, but shared values. We are Unitarian Universalists, and at the same time, we may also be agnostic, Buddhist, Christian, Hindu, humanist, Jewish, Muslim, pagan, atheists, believers in God, and those who let the great mystery be. The diversity of beliefs you'll find in a Unitarian Universalist community is one of our strengths. We are always learning how to see the world from a different perspective. What unites us are our core principles that uphold 7 real-world values: believing in the worthiness of every person, showing compassion and fairness, accepting others for who they are, growing through a personal search for truth, leading with democratic spirit, working for justice, and understanding that everything is interconnected. 7 days a week, Unitarian Universalists live these principles by doing. When we gather, we worship, reflect, and remind ourselves what matters most in life. Whatever our age, we learn to live with more wisdom, more awareness, more gratitude, and more soul. We show our values by showing up to answer the call for social justice. We have a track record of standing on the side of love for civil rights, LGBTQ equality, immigration reform, environmental sustainability, reproductive justice, racial justice, and more. Find what it means to live your deepest values out loud. Join us on this extraordinary adventure of faith.
Okay, so this gives you just a general overview of us. And there's one part in there that talks about 7 principles, and I will talk a little bit about that. There have been some changes around that. I wanted to know if you had any thoughts or any comments or any questions on what you have heard so far. All right, so we'll continue with the presentation. I wanted to share this quote with you. It's a little lengthy, so I will read it as it shows up there. Feel free to follow along. Some use worship the natural world. Some believe in reincarnation. Some speak to the ancestors. Some believe in the scientific method. Some follow Jesus or Muhammad or Gandhi. Some believe in a single God. Some believe in many gods. And some believe in no God. Somehow, in spite of, not in spite of, but because of these many truths, we are Unitarian Universalists. There are many different beliefs within Unitarian Universalism, and this is our greatest uniqueness and our greatest strength. However, in order to tap into our superpower as a religion, we can't just coexist without meaningfully engaging with each other's truth. We can't gloss over our differences and expect that they will never affect our relationships or our community. Now let's have time. And the reason I wanted to share this particular reading, there are many others that kind of speaks to who we are, but this really in a way encapsulates who we are, the different beliefs that you have within our faith tradition, the different theologies, the different ways of being, and yet because of that, we coexist together well. But the other thing is, even though we have all these different faiths, all these different beliefs within our faith tradition, we are not doing this alone. We do it in a community, right? We support one another's spiritual growth. And then the second piece you might have heard in there is, so it's not just about our spiritual growth, it's how we show up in the larger community. So another way of looking at it is, we are always working towards a beloved community where justice and equity reigns, where it's what's naturally, that's what's happening. It's not something that you're wondering, is this a just world? But that's what we're working towards. So we try to do that within our smaller little communities, where we are with our families, and in the larger community in the world. So that is the gist out of our beliefs. So the two parts here, the spiritual growth, our own grounding, and then how do we use that to make the world better, to live with the world, to live with our other fellow beings who are sharing this earth with us. Again, any thoughts, any questions on that? Okay. So in the video, you might have heard, and if you're not familiar, again, you're Universalism, you might not have heard reference to 7 principles. And so all of those ideas are still here, but we recently we are a faith that believes in growing. So we're not stagnant. So as we know better, as Toni Morrison said, I gotta remember her name. Please help me. You know better, you do better.
The poet.
The poet, you know, Maya Angelou.
Maya Angelou.
As Maya Angelou says, as you know better, you do better. And we try to practice that. So as we learn, as the world changes, as we learn of maybe ways that, you know what, we could have done this better, or we should have done that better, or, and the way we're looking at things, we are excluding some people. So as we learn those things, we grow. So for years, we were using our 7 principles, but over the last few years, we have worked on updating our shared values to better reflect the world we live in, and to better reflect who we want to become. We are always working towards. We don't believe that we are finished. We're a finished product working towards. And all of the ideas that were in the 7 principles are still captured here, but it's a little different here. So you see that this is our the new way that our values are represented. So right in the middle of everything we do is love. Love is in the center of what we do. However we are engaging the world, are we doing it in a loving way? So love's at the center, and around all of that, you see the different values here: interdependence, equity, transformation, pluralism, generosity, and justice. And I have additional information here shortly, but just kind of so you can see what we mean by those, right? But this new little symbol, what I like about it, and by new, I mean literally, we voted at our General Assembly in June to make this official. So that's how new this is. What I love about it, not only is love at the center, there are all these little semicircles around it that leaves it open, because there's always room to grow. There's always room to grow. So like justice isn't closed here, because there's more to learn, there's more ways to grow and to be just in the world, and so on. So let's talk a little bit about these different values. So this here, I just shared all this, so we'll just go to the next one and just individually share with the different values I just shared with you. Interdependence. So what we mean by that, as one of our shared values, you may not remember that was one of the ones on there. We honor the interdependence of all existence. We believe that we are connected. We are connected not just to one another, we are connected to all living beings. And so we must engage the world and one another with humility and acknowledging our place in it. It's not just about us human beings. It's about every creature that lives on this earth. And the earth itself, we covenant to protect the earth and all beings from exploitation. Yes, and that is something we definitely work towards. So we, most union congregations have what we call a green team that focuses on environmental justice. And in the broader way of looking at environment. If you think about environmental justice, for example, it's not just the environment, it impacts others, and it's usually those who are in the margins who suffer the most when it comes to all the ways we ravage the environment. So we respect the earth, and we try to not exploit it. Pluralism, we believe that all cultures, all people, all have values, are all sacred, and there are things we can learn from another, and we are responsible for a search of truth and meaning. So one thing, and this one here gives me the opportunity to share. So one thing that is probably the thing that is, I'm sure there are other things, but this is one of the things that separates us from most other faith traditions. Most other faith traditions have the one thing, right? The one thing that is that faith tradition rallies around, right? For us, as you saw in the beginning, you can be a Buddhist and be a Yu. You can be a Christian and be so the responsibility, which makes it, I think, harder on Unitarian Universalists, is the responsibility is on you to do that search, to find what it is that grounds you. Because we don't believe that any one faith tradition has all the answers, right? I mean, so, and in my mind, an example for that is for Christians, for example, how are we to believe that just God would give the truth to just one group of people, and then all others have to figure it out? And unless this one group of people find them and give them the truth, then, So I think every faith tradition, and most Jews believe that, every faith tradition has its value, and every one of us are looking for a way to make meaning of life, right? And which is where spirituality and religion is needed for all of us, right? We all need a way to make meaning out of life. And if for that person it is Christianity, then we honor that, we value that. And if for that person it is paganism, we honor that, we value that. And for some, atheists, the way they may make meaning is with relationships and so on, or community. We value that. We are all trying to figure out the best way to make meaning of this life that we are living. So that responsibility is for us to take on, but still we do it in community. And it is as we coexist together in our faith community, we encourage one another, we challenge one another to do that work. Justice. We feel that we have a call to justice, to show up for those in the margins. As I mentioned earlier, we work toward a diverse, multicultural, beloved community where all thrive. So we work to dismantle racism and all form of systemic oppression. So it is very important to us that it's not just a world, but it is a just world. It's not just I'm able to thrive, but others are able to thrive, and not just existing. Transformation. We adapt to a changing world. I mentioned that a little bit earlier. The world is changing. People are looking for different ways to connect. People are looking for different ways to ground themselves spiritually, and we're always changing with the world. How do we best accompany people on their spiritual journey? How do we best create spaces where people feel welcome to come in and explore their spirituality and still feel supported and not judged for who they are, what they believe, and so on. And in speaking and believe what we believe, sometimes people make the which I think is a really big mistake by thinking that Unitarian Universalists believe in everything. We do not. We definitely do not believe in hatred. We do not believe in oppression. We do not believe in any. So everybody is welcome within a Unitarian Universalist faith, but not all behaviors are welcome. And it is very possible that someone who lives life, as you saw, love is what's at our center. So if somebody engages life through a lens of hatred, they would not feel comfortable in a Unitarian Universalist congregation. That's just the reality of it. We are open to everyone, but we are definitely not open to someone who feels that their way of being in the world is to oppress others and then come into our sacred spaces and engaging people that way. So, you know, and even as you use, we'll say that, oh, you use, we believe in everything, but we do not. We don't believe in misogyny, any of that. So, and please feel free to share if anybody wants to share. Remember that generosity. We try to cultivate a spirit of gratitude and generosity, and you know, and if you are ever happen to find yourself in a UU space, you, for example, let me speak specifically of Christian Unitarian Church of Orlando. One of the things that newcomers or visitors always say is how warm and welcoming they feel in our spaces, and when somebody's in crisis, showing up for one another, whether the person is a member or somebody who's a newcomer among us and visiting and so on, we make it a priority to show up for one another in a compassionate way. And another way is that we want to freely share our faith with others. And what that means is that I think that's part of the growing and changing, right? There may be things that in our faith, we never feel that our faith is perfect the way it is, right? But by sharing it freely, new people are coming in, right? And as new people come in, we learn from new people coming in, and that may mean changing certain ways that we do things, because we've realized the way we were doing this, you know what, wasn't inclusive enough, right? So in sharing, we definitely know that that will also change us. Equity, you know, that's similar, I think, to justice, except it speaks specifically to every person having the right to flourish with inherent dignity and worthiness. We believe everyone is worthy from birth. There's nothing you have to do to be worthy. There is, we come in worthy, and which is the part of us that's universalist. We believe in universal salvation. That's who we are. There are no sacrifices we have to make to be worthy. There is no particular way you need to be worthy. There's no particular belief system you need to be a part of to be worthy. And by that we mean even the people that grinds out every bone in our bodies, right? We mean those people too are worthy. And it doesn't mean that we are naive in how we look at this. So it may not be safe for me to approach someone who has a particular hatred for Black people. It may be better for Judith to approach that person. It may not be safe for me to do that, but I still believe that person has worthiness. To say someone doesn't have for anyone to judge that someone doesn't have worthiness is really removing that person out of the human family. And who are we to remove anyone from the human family, right? To say somebody's unworthy. You know, there are people I would never agree with or feel safe enough to sit and have a cup of coffee with. That doesn't mean that person is unworthy, right? So we really believe that, and it is. And then I'm saying that, knowing that it is a challenge for us. And the good thing is we're always growing. We don't need to be perfect. We're always growing. We're always learning. We're always trying to become better versions of ourselves. So, you know, and there are times when we see certain things happening. We're like, this person is worthy. You know, it's a challenge, but we do believe everyone is worthy, and nothing they need to do, nothing from the onset people need to do to become worthy. So, any questions about that part? I see you starting with it. Any comments? No?
Who are you talking to?
You!
I
see a little
I'm
smirk.
waiting to see when you get to transformation because I'm thinking that
Yes.
fits in with the worthiness.
Yes, good point, good point. Yes.
And I'm thinking that's coming
Wait,
soon.
where's transformation? Oh, no.
There we go.
Yes.
You didn't have to jump on my part.
No, but good point. And we will, just like I believed earlier, we believe it is each person's responsibility to grow and find ways to transform and become better versions of ourselves, right? And not only that, we also, I've already said that, transforming our religion, by the way, we learn also, which is where this very new set of values come in. Did you want to share a little more about that?
No, this is your talk.
Oh, no. Yeah, hey, as you know, no one person has all the answers.
Reverend Margalie is very generous. Back to the generosity.
Yes, there you go. And did you want to share something?
No, my brain just stopped, right?
Okay, all right. I really think that the part about worthiness, and as Judith just pointed out, I do believe they do very well together. Because just because we believe that everyone is worthy, we're not saying that everyone should just stay where they are, right? We are saying that it is our responsibility as human beings to work on becoming better versions of ourselves, to do that. And it's not just good for us individually, it is good for our fellow human beings and the whole world we're living in, right? Yes, go ahead.
How do you see worthiness for a prisoner, someone who's been convicted of something awful?
Right. We do believe that someone who's been convicted of something is worthy. Now, we don't know the person's whole story. We just know the one thing that had landed them in prison. So, putting aside that they may or may not have been wrongly convicted. Let's say they were rightly convicted. But even there, we don't want to judge someone by the worst thing they have done in their lives. There's a full human being who part of that is that thing they've done and other things that they have done. And the other part of that is there are many people who are not convicted felons who have done maybe worse things and weren't caught either, right? And we're engaging them every day not knowing that secret because it hasn't been revealed. So we want to keep in mind the full person. And then we actually, one of our, we have a Church of the Larger Fellowship, which is our fully online congregation before COVID, and now every one of our churches, congregations, had an online representation. But before that, and this, we have a Church of the Larger Fellowship was always online, and before we had an online, it was through the mail and so on, and it started to support UUs and chaplains who were in the armed forces. It started there, and it has grown to all that, and they have a very big prison ministry. We have tons of UUs who are incarcerated right now through the Church of the Larger Fellowship. So yeah, we believe in the worthiness of everyone, and that is the short of it. Generosity, equity. I think I skipped transformation accidentally.
Well,
I'm
you
so
came
glad
to it. Yeah, you
mentioned
skipped.
this.
You went to equity, and then there was the.
Yeah, we
Okay.
did. Oh, I think I somehow skipped transformation. I don't know how. It was
Well, you
in
came.
there.
Okay. What are you talking
Because I
about?
did equity, So,
Pluralism.
pluralism, I talked about pluralism. That was the second one I talked about. Yes. And so, any questions about these shared values? Okay, so the chalice, which is the symbol of our faith, and I want to stop sharing this because I have another document I want to look at that I don't have to share the whole thing with you. But before I do that, so there are, as you've heard, we are very different, as you use, and different congregations have different personalities, really. You may be at a U congregation that is extremely Christian, and actually, when I lived in Ohio, this wasn't the congregation I attended, but the congregation that was about 5-6 miles, my congregation, they had on their backboard had, art that you would see in a Catholic congregation. When their children moved from one stage to the next, they were given Bibles and so on. And and a congregation in Tulsa that I visited a while back was extremely humanist, where people might fall over if they hear the word God, type thing. So depending on who attends, the congregation itself will have a personality. But just about, I'm not even gonna say just about. All UU congregations do this, have a chalice that they light. And I opened up our space here with the chalice here. And I do want to move away from, how do I stop sharing and still be able to read without everybody seeing what I guess I have 20.
Well.
Because I do want to give some information about the chalice, and it's not how it came about, and I'm not.
There's a way
remembering
to
what the
do it on PC, I'm not sure, I suppose you could have, if you just press escape and pull it up, would that be okay? But
Yeah, but
rather
it's
just-
also.
Are we online?
Yeah, the only way I see of doing it is to pull the plug, and I don't want to pull the plug.
Yeah, there's a way to do it on
So the,
PC, I'm not sure.
You can just click
Yeah.
on your beginning slide, on your intro slide.
look, this is what I will do. I'm gonna hold off the thought on the chalice, and I'm just gonna talk about how we gather, and then I'll come back and give a little information about the chalice. Go ahead.
Would you give me a snippet on the history, like how the church began or the year it began, unless that's in your presentation for later?
Oh, Unitarian Universalist
Yes.
itself. So it's not on here. I thought about that, but I knew it was an hour presentation, and I thought, most people don't talk about the history of their churches when they talk about it.
Oh, I don't know.
Well, just a snippet, like, I don't
I
even
will,
know
I
how
will.
old it is.
Oh, no,
where it
no,
began,
yes,
who began,
yes,
just
I will definitely do that, but like I
smidgen.
said, I was thinking
Okay.
of doing that, and then I thought, when people talk about their faith tradition, and the reason I thought about that is after I left the religion of my childhood, I actually did a paper on it and to learn about its history. Because
Okay.
generally, we practice religion, we don't talk about its history. However, so what makes it possible for us to be a faith tradition was, and if those of you who are history, you to remember years, throw them in for me, but I'm just gonna mention the event, was the Edict of Tarda, where in Transylvania, so we like to joke that we have something in common with vampires, In Transylvania, a group of, who was the king?
Sigismund.
Sigismund.
King Sigismund.
Yes.
Or are we talking about David?
No, you're right,
Sigismund.
you're right.
Okay.
Gathered because at that time, of course, Christianity was the rule of the day, and not only that, but the specific way of doing Christianity was the rule of the day, but Catholicism, to be specific, And so this king had gotten involved with Unitarians and learned, Unitarian, if you remember Trinity, Unitarian is that. We don't believe in the Trinity because our roots are Christian, right? And so the rule of the day was not only the universal salvation part was ruled, but also the Trinity, the belief in the Trinity. And so this group of folks meet at the Edict of Torda, and that's where the decision was made that religion, there's more than one way of doing religion, which is why I wanted to be able to read my little history there. And because of that, Unitarian Universalism was able to be, and so our roots are in Transylvania, and we exist in Europe, but in Europe, you will primarily find Unitarians, and I don't think you hear much about Universalism at all in Europe. I'm not a historian, which is,
I'm not a historian, there's.
what can you add to that?
That in Europe, we're primarily thought of as a Unitarian denomination, and being, as you said, not Trinitarian, but we see it as one God overall.
Right.
That Jesus and the Holy Spirit inform our faith, and not the end-all be-all to our faith, but a part of the larger.
Yeah, and if you have a specific question, that would make it easier for me to answer for you. But those are our general roots.
Right.
Our roots are Christian. What has happened is as the growing and the learning and growing part is where a lot of the specifically Christian views have slipped away some. They continue to be a part of our faith tradition, but the overall belief has shifted away a lot from Christianity to where really the main thing that is probably fully Christian about us is our name, right? Unitarian Universalist. It's basically telling you that we are Christians, we're Unitarian Christians, and we believe in universal salvation, right? And yeah, and when usually outside of the U.S., other than England, like in Transylvania, they do communion in their services. And when you visit other Unitarian congregations, like a friend of mine visited one in India, there's a lot of the Christian values still a part of it. I think what is very strong though in all of them is the social justice component. Yeah. But I think here in the U.S., there was a period where we were strongly humanist, very, very strongly humanist, and secular humanist. There is a book written by Bill Schultz called The Humanist Manifesto. And in there, he actually talks about he's a Unitarian Universalist minister, retired at this point. And in there, he talks about how secular humanists wanted to save religion from the far right, and that religion belongs to everyone, not just those who want to beat you over the head with it. And so on. And with the other thing that happens with Christianity, so the 7 principles that was talked about in the video, that changes over time. And there was a time when our values, or your values, had God language all over it, but it also had very sexist language in it as well. Again, the growing and changing. It speaks to me about the importance of language. It feels that the change that removed a lot of the Christian language happened in the 80s, the 50s, the 80s. And interestingly enough, when the votes were happening around that time to remove some of that language, the members who were fully Christians were against it because they worried that we would become less Christian. And I have to say, they were right. Now, see that we have become less Christian. That's the power, I think, of language, right? And which is why it's important for us to grow and change our language to reflect what's there, because we know language is important. So having these new shared values that really widen the table and to be more inclusive, I think that will change our thinking even more and how we engage the world even better.
Reverend Margalie, are you
Yes.
going to address how universalism came into the picture?
No. So I think history, I really made it, because the presentation was an hour long, I made a decision not to.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay, but you
I
had-
retract my question.
No, don't retract it, actually. So remember what I said before, I want this to go the way we want it to go. It's like, as I'm preparing this, I don't know what people want to hear, so I can set this aside and talk about that. So Unitarian and Universalism, Unitarianism and Universalism were two separate faith traditions. And actually, at one point, Universalism, I believe it was Universalism, was going to merge with UCC, which is United Church of Christ. And for some reason, that didn't happen. But Unitarian and Universalists realized that they had shared values and both had a very strong call to justice. And especially Universalism at that point was suffering in numbers. And so they approach one another and go, hey, a lot of what we want in this world, how we want to be in this world is very similar. How about if we merge? So in 1962, Unitarian Universalists merged and became one religion, and then they each had their own sets of values, and they had to sit together and figure out exactly. So, and I know I'm going to screw this up because I'm horrible at telling jokes, and because I really can't remember them, and then, but during the merge, and it was really hard, Unitarians felt that they would have indigestion, having the Universalists between them, and then Universalists felt that we would, I warned you. But the thing to know about Unitarian and Universalists, that is what they had in common. They, both their values were similar, and how their call to justice was similar. What was different about them was Unitarians were very intellectuals. They were the Harvard folks. Harvard.
Yeah.
Harvard. They were the Harvard-educated folks. Northeast New England area. Their ministers went to seminary. Heady, very heady folks. Universalists were generally economically challenged farmers, and they weren't necessarily well educated. Their ministers, the way they ordained their ministers is they would see someone's potential from a young age and groom that person to become minister, and then that person then would be ordained and would become their minister later in life. While the Unitarians, we needed the degree and all of that to be a minister. So I like to say the Unitarians and Universalists, Unitarians are the head of our faith tradition, and Universalists is they're the heart of our faith tradition. So you take the head and heart together. I think that's a very good combination. And even when, even though the merge went well, there were still some outliers who did not want to merge for a while, and I think it still exists today. There was a Universalist association that held on pretty strong. And then now you'll see our names, you'll see some congregations will say Unitarian, some will say Universalist. It doesn't mean they're one or the other, it's just that had been their names. They were Universalists at one point, and so that remains so. But when we talk about ourselves, we say Unitarian Universalists. The other thing that I think that has happened with Universalists is that because our name is long, and of course we love acronyms, we love to shorten things. So a lot of times we either call ourselves UUs or Unitarians, and Universalist gets dropped off, and which was a concern for Universalists. They were smaller at the time, and all of that. And so some of the compromises, well, one in particular, since I mentioned it earlier, ministers. So that was there was a compromise where our ministers do have to have a degree, but the congregation is who ordains the minister. It's not our governing body that does that. So only a congregation has the right to ordain a minister. That minister is in fellowship with the larger body, but only a congregation can ordain a minister. So, anything else?
I want to add something.
Oh, yes, please.
Margalie. So to her point about Unitarian Universalists being the hierarchy of the names, there is a congregation, and one of our members is a member of that congregation as well, up in, where is Karen from, Ohio? That is a Universalist Unitarian congregation.
Oh, that's interesting.
There are churches that have decided that Universalism takes priority for them.
Yes. I'm even for, a campaign for us to stop using UU and say Unitarian Universalist.
It's a struggle.
It is a struggle, because they're the heart. I really do think that Universalist reminds us, that side of ourselves remind us that, hey, let's ground ourselves. This is where it is. So, yeah.
Do you have a prayer book that you use?
No. So let's talk about that.
Okay.
Yes.
Back to the
I love
faith
this.
part.
I love this. So I'm not going to go into all of this, but that speaks to your question about prayer book. So these are some of our religious practices here. But no, we don't have a specific prayer book, and we use all prayer books.
Okay.
And not just what would be called officially prayer. We use poems and other writings. We believe that we can learn a lot from other human beings. There's wisdom in everyone. And
You have a slide several up about the sources you showed. at the
Yes,
beginning.
yes, very much early before this.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go. So these are our sources. I can read it all. Thank you for remembering that. But as you can see here, we
And our
when we
new,
broke it down, oh, sorry, go ahead.
and in our new June, previously, it was listed like this.
Yes.
Historically, because people wanted specifics. This is not excluded, is it? So, no, we're gonna put it in there. We're gonna put it in there. And then the list got longer and longer, and people said, well, what isn't in this? Well, nothing. If it is a positive contribution to your spirit or your world, then you can use it.
Yeah.
So now there is just a couple of sentences when they changed the presentation of the principles by making it one word rather than many words. They also said, okay, we don't have to list all of them, because we might exclude something that's wonderful.
Yeah.
So now it's 2 or 3 sentences, I don't remember what the sentences are, but it is, we take all information and inspiration and motivation from all that is wise in the world. Something like that.
Exactly, it's exactly that. We used to say the 6 sources,
Right, and that was,
right? But it's more than, and then this is how, as Martha said, this is how they were listed. But if you notice something that's listed here is direct experience of transcending mystery and wonder, right? I think a lot of times what we do is, if something is written in a book by somebody who's dead, then that thing is so important. And we feel it's sacred. And I'm not talking about something that is necessarily considered religious, but usually anything. If somebody's written it and it's a book and they're dead, then that is something. But the thing that we want to acknowledge in faith tradition is that our own direct experiences, there's value in that. There is wisdom if we are engaging life in a way that fosters growth, and even when we're not trying to live life in a way that fosters growth, we learn, sort of like, even a broken clock is right twice a day, type thing. I mean, even people we don't consider to be wise have wisdom and say wise things, and we affirm that, so, and then something else, words and deeds. All of these are still true for us, and as Martha added, we know that, again, this limits the sources. We can find wisdom, we can learn from so many sources, so limiting them to just 6, we've learned was just not enough. So, you could be in a Unitarian Universalist congregation and hear a prayer that is extremely Christian. The care team did a service recently where the hymns were old Christian hymns and so on, and you can go and not hear the whole service. You don't hear God mentioned once. You hear the divine, and you hear other wise and grounding words, but you don't hear God. And I think the whole world doesn't. The whole world is not Christian, and all of our sources are not all Christianity based. So you hear that. The other thing I wanted, having said that, many Unitarian Universalists who become UUs as adults in the U.S. are UUs after having left some Christian-based tradition, right? So, all that to say, if we have any baggage, it's usually connected to Christianity and not other faith tradition for Unitarian Universalists. So that is, so I think we are always, and not only that, we started out as a Christian faith. So I think in the background of our minds and as a faith, I think Christianity is always there, whether it is a challenge for us or whether it is recognizing it as part of our history, and those who are practicing Christians. So I think it's there for us. I'll go to you and then we'll go to you and then we'll go to you.
Do you have a program for the children?
Yes. We have, I don't know if you remember me mentioning Judith earlier, most UU congregations, and the only reason they wouldn't have one would be maybe financial reasons, or they're very tiny and don't have one, but most UU congregations what we call a religious educator. And even though, when we think of, we usually think of religious education, we think of the entire lifespan, but most congregations, the work of the religious educator is usually with the children of our congregation, the youth and children of our congregation. And we have what the faith tradition calls Sunday school. We have that. It's different, of course, but we do have that in our congregations. Yes. Judith,
I was going to speak to what we talked about sources. Wait a second. What were we saying? Oh, you asked about a prayer book. Well, we don't have a prayer book currently. Anyway, we do have we have a hymnal and that of commonly used hymns and readings, which are drawn from all these sources
and more.
And we expand on it on a regular basis because we have grown so and changed so.
Yes.
How many families in your congregation?
Specifically families,
Families
I
and children
can't-
or members?
I'm just curious.
Members,
I guess.
yeah, we have currently,
We just added some.
we are 235
Oh,
right now,
okay.
yes, members, yeah. And, of course, family units, that would be, but number of children registered, where are we
Somewhere
right now?
between 30s and 35 and 45 right now.
Yeah.
Depends on the day. I mean,
Yeah.
registered, I have
Registered.
names of about 45 kids. How many attend, vary between 10 and 45, depending.
Yes.
I think something else is different about a Unitarian church. Perhaps you have to be a little bit bigger than 30, but we have many friends.
Yes.
And many congregations that once they hit 100, possibly, have many friends who pop in and out, who are involved with some of the activities of the church, but they belong to a church or they don't want to be part of any church as far as an official member, but they like how we are. And they want to take a class, they want to do Tai Chi, they want to come on a Sunday, they have family to visit, and they want to go someplace on Sunday with that family member, and this is a place that everybody can agree to and sit there and be happy and have a good experience. So I know from reading that there are some congregations that claim that they have as many friends or more than they have members.
Yes.
And they
It's-
really
it's,
depend upon
yeah.
the giving of
Yeah.
those friends,
Yeah.
because these friends are quite generous as well.
Yeah.
Because they connect to that church.
Yeah.
And many of them might say to others that that's their church.
I would have,
Well, different subjects, so to finish.
yeah, it's different too.
No,
We
I
only
had-
have
I
2
had
minutes
different
and I wanted
subjects,
to, no, so go ahead, see what you're saying.
Oh, very quickly, I wanted to address the question about Sunday school and
Yes.
children's education.
You are the exact person to answer that.
Unlike Christian and Jewish, and I would assume Sunday religious schools for the Islam and other Sikh communities, we don't have a catechism kind of education methodology. We have education that helps our kids interpret and come to terms and find meaning in our values and bring them out into the world. So
Yeah.
we're encouraging them to experience them, and it's more of an experiential sort of thing than
Yes.
a rote thing.
I think a very important point, and another way of putting that from what you said, I don't even know if that's what you meant to talk about, is that we don't insist that our kids become UUs as adults, which is different from most. We would love it. We would love it because, and we understand, the whole point is, we even have a neighboring faith program where we actually take our kids to different faith traditions to learn about faith traditions. So similar to this, but we are running out of time. Something I wanted to mention, to go back to the history part, is we also started in the Northeast, the New England area. Literally, throw stone distance. I mean, there are U congregations those small little states up there, tons of U congregations. So that's where we are congregated. And actually, southern congregations in these areas happened when snowbirds came during winters. They wanted a place to worship, and our congregation is an example of that. They wanted a place to worship and miss their congregation up north, and they started that here. And the one other thing, for us here, we were instrumental in, and which is part of our values, we were instrumental in starting Planned Parenthood here. We worked very hard on starting the suffragist movement here in Central Florida, to where one of our first members, one of the ones who helped bring Unitarian Universalism here in Florida, was honored by the city recently. If you go on, what is that street she's on? There's a plaque.
Hampton?
Is it? No, there's ours. There's
oh.
one in front of our church, but there's one on a major
At the
street.
History Museum.
Yes,
And
thank
the
you. There's
plaza.
a plaque there with her name and so on. So, because of time, we said an hour and it's 2 minutes past. So, but thank you for taking the direction somewhere else, because I really did want to talk about what we wanted to talk about. Of course, I had something, but that's why I kept saying question, really. So thank you for taking us somewhere else, because that's what the group was interested in. So I appreciate that. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Nice overview.
Good. All right, and of course, we are on Robinson, East Robinson.
Yeah,
If you want to-
looked you up.
Oh, there you go.
1901
The
East
Milk
Robinson,
District.
on the corner, parking lot's off Hampton.
Yes, yes. But